Thank you. I appreciate being invited and to share some of the insights and information that we've been collecting about millennials and affluence over the course of a long time. Since about 2002, I've been focusing my research almost exclusively on the affluent consumer sector. As Jack's mentioned, and I think it's really powerful to remind ourselves, is we're all coming here from different backgrounds, and you all are jewelry experts, and I make no claim of expertise in the jewelry area that you are experts in. In fact, I'm quite intimidated by all of you. My expertise is in marketing and branding and especially understanding the mind of the consumer, which is really where the focus of my work is all on. But I do research affluence, I do research the luxury market, and if there's one luxury good that epitomizes luxury to me, it's jewelry, because nobody needs any jewelry. I mean, there's sort of an argument one could make for other categories of luxury goods that we do need handbags and shoes and clothing and so on. So you're the epitome of luxury. So I've been, knocking around jewelry circles for a while and talking to jewelry audiences. And in fact, I was a couple of years ago, I was at the JCK show out in Las Vegas talking about jewelry, and a man came up to me after the session and he said, "Oh, that David Yurman, what do you think of that David Yurman? He sells $10 worth of sterling silver and sells it for like $300, $400. I mean, that's crazy." And he was, in effect, saying, there's something wrong with that. And before I hit him over the head, because I wanted to say, this is, what do you think I've been talking about all this time? I mean, the fact is that David Yurman, I said, is crazy like a fox, because isn't that what we all want to do when it comes to selling our goods? We want to take something cheap and sell it for a whole lot of money, and that's where our profit comes from, and that's business success. And the way you all can know whether David Yurman's jewelry is good or not. I don't want to get into that discussion because I really don't have any expertise there. But what I do have expertise in is David Yurman is a very savvy marketer. He really understands his customers, and he is a branding expert. And that's what the challenge is for all of us, because if you're looking for, to understand marketing of luxury, it's not about what it costs. It isn't about the cost of goods. In fact, that shouldn't ever play into our pricing equations at all. It's about the value. How much value can you instill into the piece, into the item, into what you're trying to sell, and get as much money for it? So as we look at luxury, it's not about the money, it's about the meaning. And as Warren Buffett reminds us, price is what we pay, but value is what we get. So the meaning, the value, that's where the essence of the marketing and branding is all about, and that's what you want to be focusing as you sell and want to build a business. And as I look at generations, of consumers as they've come along, I look at millennials. They are, in fact, starved for meaning in their lives. This is a generation that has been marketed to ever since they were babies in their crib. They know a lot more about marketing than most of us will ever know about marketing. They are very, very savvy. And they're looking for meaning in their music and in their media and in their movies that they watch. They're ascribing incredible meaning to the celebrities that they follow. And you can provide meaning to them too through the products and the fine jewelry items that you have to sell. Now, as a market researcher, when I study any particular market, there's three perspectives that you really need to understand about the consumer and the market that you're studying. One is the demographics. You also need to understand something about purchase behavior, how people buy products and what they're buying. And then most importantly, and that's why it's got the biggest circle, is psychographics, the psychology of the consumers. And I'm going to talk to you about the study that we've been doing on the millennial generation as it reflects on luxury in general as well as jewelry in particular. Now, when you talk about business success, it starts with understanding your consumer. That's the most important piece. And when it comes to understanding your consumer, you really do need to understand something about demographics. That's the facts and figures that describe the market that you're going out looking at. And when it comes to millennials and affluence and the demographics of those market segments, I find a tremendous amount of misinformation is out there. So I'm going to kind of try to correct some of that misinformation. First, by the numbers, the millennials are born from 1980 to 2000. These dates of generations are often in transition, but we're sort of now setting the stage. It's about a 20-year generation, very similar to the baby boomers, which was another 20-year generation from 1946 to 64. Out of 123 million U.S. households, that's all there are in the country, about 26 million of them are headed up by millennials in 2014. So if we look, but the millennials are as big as the baby boomers in terms of generations, about 76 million baby boomers, about 71, 72 million millennials. So as a generation, they're just as big, but they really have not yet started to impact the luxury market because they haven't yet reached levels of affluence, because affluence, high incomes, comes with age. And if we look at the demographics of affluence, if we look at age of household income by the age of the householder, we find there's a window of affluence when people's households reach the highest level of income. It's from 35 to 54 years old. And it breaks down into two 10-year segments, 35 to 44, slightly behind those who are age 45 to 54 years old. So that's the window of affluence. Now, we don't want to ignore the 55 to 64-year-olds, but by that time, people are starting to retire and incomes are dropping household-wise. But when we look at the 35 to 54 years old, they're not all equal to you as target markets for luxury, because the younger cohort, 35 to 44, is much more important to you as a marketer than the 45 to 54-year-olds, because the younger people are at an acquisitive life stage. They are often acquiring luxuries that they never had. People, by the time they're 45 to 54, often have a body of luxury items in their closets and in their homes, and they are not buying quite as much. So your younger people are more important to you and more impactful to you. But if we look at the numbers of young people, what we're finding now is that the younger people are on the decline until about 2020, whereas the older cohort from 45 to 54 make up the largest segment of the target market of affluence consumers in the country. And what that means is there are fewer now consumers in the marketplace that are at the prime age for investing and indulging in luxury goods. And what that looks like is this chart. The darker chart, the darker chart on the top, the darker line on the top, are the matures, and they are the more mature affluents. They're dominating until about 2019, 2020, when the younger people are going to start to come back and assume dominance in the marketplace. Those will be the millennial generation that will become the new target market for luxury. Between now and then, we have something I call the luxury drought, because we really do have a shortfall of households. Those Gen Xer households, which are now in the prime target market for luxury, really are not as big, anywhere near as big as the boomers, and so they can't make up the difference lost by boomers as they age. I call it the luxury drought. Harry Dent, an economist, just wrote a book, and he calls it the demographic cliff, which sounds much more threatening, because he's looking not only at the demographic changes that I see in the marketplace, the baby boomers declining in terms of their spending, the Gen Xers never being able to fill the shoes of the baby boomers simply by size, and the millennials still sort of back there, not yet reaching maturity or adulthood and their spending potential. But he's also looking at other factors and feels that we are really in the throes of a potentially very deep recessionary environment from 2014 through late 2019. And he doesn't see a turnaround in the economy until about 2023. So he's a few years behind me in terms of the perspective on when will we see a rising economy, when can we start feeling, some growth in the economy. I strongly recommend Harry Dent's book, and I've written some excerpts from it. If you are interested in it, you can certainly send me an email and I can send those to you. But it kind of looks a little bit dicey between now and then. Now, we know who is going to become affluent. I mean, we can predict affluence based upon education levels. So we know in the generation of millennials who we can easily identify who's going to likely reach affluence. But the fact is the millennials are going to be late coming to the luxury party because, one, there's a significant unemployment of millennial generation, or underemployment. The baby boomers are not retiring as fast as previous generations, so they're not finding the opportunities in the job market. And most importantly, from the point of view of consumer marketers, the millennials are being saddled with a tremendous amount of educational debt that the baby boomers never had to deal with. It's estimated $1 trillion in debt. What that means in terms of households is almost $40,000 to $50,000 of debt, educational debt, for people who come out of college in that generation. And that is a big, heavy load to bear as you are starting your career and starting families. So Dent saying about we're looking between now and 2023, 2023, a difficult and challenging environment. And what that means for marketers, we're not going to see organic growth. We're not going to see anything like the boom that we saw from 2001, 2002 till about 2007 when the first recession hit. It's going to be a real tough battle in terms of marketers, and it's going to be a tough competitive battle because the only way your business is going to grow, or any business is going to grow, is by taking market share from your competition. So it's going to be tight and tough as we look forward. Now, when we look at affluence, I mentioned that it comes with middle age as people mature. Reaching 35 is when they start seeing their incomes growing. Well, the affluent market we define as the top 20% of U.S. households based on income. Today, that starts roughly at about $100,000. And New York audiences invariably say to me, "How can you say someone who makes $100,000 is affluent?" Well, it's a big country, and there's lots of diversity here, and $100,000 in Des Moines, Iowa goes a lot further than in New York City, but that's where the top 20% of U.S. households fall. Now, there's about 24.5 million affluent households in that top 20% sector. But only about 14% of those affluent households today are represented or headed up by someone in the millennial generation. And it's interesting that 14% is virtually the same as the affluents that are 65 and older. So, and if we look at the top 5% or top 2% of U.S. households based on income, which are the ultra affluents, there are fewer than 10% of those households headed up by millennials. So they're coming, but they're not here yet. And as I said, we can project very, very effectively who is going to reach affluence because, people don't get affluent by accident. I mean, yes, there are a few entrepreneurs who make lots and lots of money, but most affluent people work pretty hard to get an education, get their careers going and moving and progressing in their education. And this chart, and I should mention, because I don't think I did at the beginning, I have these slides, and I'll be glad to share them with you if you leave your cards with me, so you can get a copy, if you give us, my husband is in the back, or myself, your cards. I'll be glad to share it with you. But the bars at the top is the average income of a household based upon education levels. So professional people have a average household income of over $181,000, but they're much less represented in the total population. Interestingly enough, in the whole U.S. economy, less than 40% of U.S. households are headed up by someone with a college education. But if we look at the affluent sector, that's over 2/3 are headed up by a person with college degree or higher. Now, these are smart consumers, and they're the smartest customers that you're going to face. And in fact, millennials are even smarter than any generation that's come before them. Affluents do not leave their business smarts at the office when they go home at night. They are not spendthrifts. They're not just looking to see how much money they can spend. They are very careful with their money. As I keep reminding people, people don't get rich by spending a lot of money. They get rich by saving it, by conserving it, by being very careful about how they spend it. So as consumers, the affluent, not only are they very smart and they know a lot, but they're also really hungry for information that you as marketers and branding professionals can provide them about products to make them better consumers. Now, I'm really intrigued, and I've been a big fan of home shopping, television shopping, for quite some time. And Carol Brody is one of your cohorts, one of your group, that has succeeded in selling fine jewelry, maybe, I don't know, is it designer jewelry or not, but fine jewelry on HSN. She launched her line there, and she's doing very, very well at it. And I think the reason is she can provide information. You know, you have this wonderful platform on television of explaining all the details and the intricacies. And I watch television shopping just as sort of entertainment because I find it really fascinating. But, you know, she's also a smart lady. She uses social media to her advantage. And she really understands the challenges of marketing in this new environment, so many people get frustrated by the internet, but it's like, wake up, smell the roses. This is what we have to deal with. And this is the successful people in the future, the ones who really know how to use that internet to sell their products. I want to quote Carol because I think she says some great things. I think a lot of brands spend too much time protecting their brand equity that they forget that they need to appeal to a new customer. I see so many brands relying on global expansion in new markets based on old brand equity. Amen, because all these big luxury brands are off to China, but China isn't a free market. I think that's a very risky place to play. What happens when there is a glut in new markets to penetrate? You have to go back to your established markets that are thriving and growing, and remember that old brand equity, that old idea of luxury, old idea of what's luxury jewelry, is only as good as a new brand innovation and technology. It's not just about your product, and that is, I think, really key. Now, not only are affluents middle-aged and highly educated, they also live very stable lives. They tend to be married, and really it's often two incomes that put a household into the role of affluence, into that level of affluence. But if we look at the millennial generation, and even in my own family, it's just not my children, but my sister's children, they have babies before they get married. And then they say, and I don't understand this at all, but my niece says, well, we're not ready to get married yet, but you're ready to have a baby? So it's just they're delaying marriage for whatever reason, but I think that that's also going to delay them into coming into affluence. And we also know statistically that women who are single, who have children, usually have much lower levels of income than married women. So it's really, I think there's a very negative impact on some of these sociological changes that are occurring because it's going to delay these folks' entrance into the luxury market. So to sum up the demographics, I thought I'd do a little informal SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. I think there's a lot of threats abound. Baby boomers are not spending. Baby boomers are retiring. As people retire, they change the way they spend. They're looking toward spending money on experiences rather than on goods, and you are selling, basically you're selling a luxury good. Gen Xers are the prime market through now in 2020, yet those Gen Xer households are much smaller in numbers than the baby boomers ever were. And millennials, I think, are going to be delayed in coming into the luxury party simply because of some of the changes and sociological changes that we see. Opportunities abound, however, for companies and brands and marketers that get up close and personal with this consumer and really understand their unique tastes, their unique sensibilities, and their unique striving for meeting that is beyond just what a marketer says is meaningful. So you need to make your brand relevant and meaningful to the consumers. And from the historical perspective about gold that I learned this morning, there's quite a story to tell that I think these young people are very interested in learning. So you have strengths, gold jewelry is real and it represents a lasting value. And you have a powerful story to tell, but potential weaknesses, and this can be a fatal one. If you believe that the millennials are going to respond the same way that all other generations have done, if you think that the same answers, the same solutions, the same branding propositions are going to work for them, you're sadly mistaken. And what I see among young people in our research is luxury is really not as relevant to their lifestyles, because they look at luxury and that word, I'm preceding myself, but as really just a term that marketers use. Like designer jewelry, it means nothing anymore. So, as I look to the marketplace, Macy's is a marketer that is really on the forefront of this millennial generation, is really seriously studying these young people and is seriously presenting and developing new products and new departments and really taking them under their wings to learn about these consumers. So watch what Macy's is doing. Right now they've released a new video series they kind of take on Project Runway, where they're going to have a 10-episode series where stylists will work with Macy's product and style people. So they're really on the forefront. But I happen to spend time in Macy's, and when I look at the fine jewelry department at Macy's, it's like nobody's woken them up to the fact that they're in the 21st century, because our age Macy's is the fine jewelry department. And it's like, tell them that they need to wake up and come into this 21st century. This looks like your grandmother's department. And I'm recently become a grandmother, and it's the best thing in the world to be. I love being a grandmother, but I'll tell you, you don't want your grandmother's jewelry, you don't want your grandmother's clothes, you don't want your grandmother's style. That's not what you're looking for. So let's turn now to some of the research that we've done on millennials and their gold jewelry purchases. And this is purchase behavior. And I'm going to be drawing from our luxury tracking study. We've been doing this since 2004. Every quarter we survey 1,000, 1,200 plus affluent luxury consumers in the marketplace. Now, in our survey this year, the 24 to 34-year-olds, which is exclusively now millennials, millennial generation affluent luxury consumers, they represent about 20%, less than 20% of my sample. They're representative. They're 14% of the overall affluent market is millennials, so it's representative of the whole generation. And our ACT survey talks about aspirations, money, shopping, lifestyle values, and priorities. And so I'll be sharing some of that, as well as the focus group results from we're going to be doing a quantitative survey with millennials this month. In fact, when I go back to my office next week, that's what I'm going to be working on, getting that into the field. But we've done some preliminary focus group work, and I'll be sharing some of the insights from that. But in our most recent luxury study, we asked about attitudes about what excites you when it comes to buying and shopping. What kind of categories of goods and services excites you? And this is the list. And I only compared 24 to 34-year-olds, millennials, with those 55 to 70, and those are all exclusively baby boomers. Baby boomers are now 50 years old and above, but exclusively baby boomers. And what I found really interesting was way down at the bottom is jewelry. And only 25% of the millennial affluents say buying jewelry gives them a thrill, compared to 31% of baby boomers. And guess what? That's a statistically significant difference. So why is that? I mean, what is it about jewelry that they don't like as much as boomers like? And I think one reason is that millennials' first introduction to buying fine jewelry comes with wedding and engagement rings. So, that's a stress-filled experience anyway, which jewelers don't help at all by focusing on the 4 C's and all this crazy stuff about diamonds and judging the diamonds and the quality of the diamonds and so on. It is a stress-filled experience. But what is really interesting, if we look back at that previous chart, is that millennials get a much greater joy when it comes to buying technology. Okay, well, guess what? Buying technology it involves a lot of information. You really have to be, understand technology. You need to have a lot of detailed knowledge, just like you need when you're facing jewelry buying. It involves sales clerk interactions because, you don't walk in and pick a diamond off the shelf. Like you don't go into a store and pick a computer off the shelf. You've got to deal with the salesperson. And it does take time. So just because buying jewelry might be harder, I don't think is the reason why it's not fun for them. I think it's really a matter of they just don't have the background or experience to understand what they're really paying for. And a good deal of that, as Jack pointed out, is design. What makes an Apple iPhone, much more expensive than a Samsung? It's not about the cost of goods, because they're probably made in exactly the same factories. It's about the quality of design and innovation, and it is a certain amount of celebrity that Steve Jobs had. So I think, millennials are a generation that can talk about design intelligently, and you can communicate your design values intelligently to these people as well. In our focus groups, we talked to millennials about jewelry. We asked them questions about what makes it special to you. And what they told us, the first most important finding was the jewelry business is a racket. They're telling me one thing and it's really not worth what they're saying it is. And, the value is just not discernible. But again, this is a generation that can understand the difference between an Apple iPhone's value and a Samsung. You can communicate that too. So there are some real challenges, I think, of talking to this generation in terms that they can understand. And as one of my favorite people, Don Draper, says in Mad Men, if you don't like what's being said, you've got to change the conversation. And I'm so glad that Mad Men is coming back this weekend. But we really need to create a new dialogue with our customers, with this generation, around jewelry in general, around gold in particular, and take it out of the objective categories of carats and cost per ounce and all that stuff that is just objective, and translate it into subjective meaning for these young people that they can understand. And I take inspiration from the Leo Schachter company, which created the Leo diamond and markets this Leo diamond. And the whole point of view of this marketing of the Leo diamond is they throw the 4 C's right out the window. So you don't need to know the 4 C's, because that's something you can't tell, and a normal person can't tell or discern anyway. What you need to focus on is the brilliance. Any consumer can understand the brilliance, and that Leo diamond is more brilliant than any other diamond. Now, this is an example of great marketing. Now, I've had people like, the David Yurman story come up to me, well, don't you know that the Leo diamond is just a cut that all of us know how to do, or something like that. They're telling me this technical stuff like that's going to make a difference to me. I don't care. I care about the marketing. Great marketing. They found a point of difference and they push that point of difference, and it makes It makes a person want to buy a Leo diamond over some generic other kind of diamond because it's more brilliant. That's marketing. So I think the time now is to find a new story to tell about gold. And I was just this weekend, as I was preparing this, watching an underwater archaeology show. I happen to like, archaeology shows. And the man was talking about bringing up the Etosha jewels and all the wreckage from the Etosha down in the Caribbean. And he says, people think we open this box up and there's all these jewels and things, like in the movies. Well, he says, no, you open up the box filled with silver and it looks like just iron. It looks like anything because it's all corroded and it's horrible looking. But, he said, when we find gold, it looks as good as the day it went down there. It can be 300, 500 years under the water, salt water, and it's as perfect and as pristine and as beautiful as the day it went under the water. And I think that's a powerful story that means something. Not carats or cost per ounce, but that means something. So it's the noble metal. I don't know that the millennials know what that means. It's everlasting quality of gold. There's a romance to gold, and it could become the eternal metal of marriage and love. And gold is forever, and I think there's a story there that you can tell very effectively that hasn't been told to this generation before. Now, in terms of our ACT study, our affluent consumer tracking study, in any given period, about 15 to 20% of the millennials that we survey buy high-end or luxury jewelry. Women are much more active buying jewelry than men. I guess that's no surprise. So over 80% of the jewelry, fine jewelry that is purchased in our study, is bought for women. Men tend not to buy jewelry for themselves. If we find men buying men's jewelry, there also tends to be buying women's jewelry too. So there is an overlap here. So maybe buy one, get one, or his and her matching designs and styles might be a very good way of getting men more involved in buying jewelry for themselves. And from gifting research that we do about gift giving, men buy jewelry for women, but women very, very rarely buy jewelry as a gift for a man. So I think there's a real opportunity there to create awareness of jewelry for men as a gift item. And I think a brand that has done a good job of creating, an experience, translating the jewelry from a product into an experience, and also hitting both the male and female gender in terms of consumers, is Alex and Annie. They have done a superb job of targeting and translating their brand into an experience. And everything is gender neutral, and I think that's a real winning combination. Not only the fact that it's made in the USA, and not only the fact that it's very affordable, but I really do think that's a very worthwhile brand. You may not think that you compete with them, and you may very well not, but it certainly is a good brand to study for branding ideas and marketing ideas. Now, in terms of the types of jewelry that millennials buy. I do have a typo there, so don't read the last line. They buy earrings and rings more often, but they also are way ahead in terms of bridal and wedding jewelry. So that's where they really pop compared to other generations in terms of their purchases of jewelry. It's in the bridal area. Okay, so they're buying lots of bridal jewelry, but guess what? They're not buying lots of fine gold, and that's what I think is really a powerful finding from this research. More than 55% of the older generation is buying fine gold. They understand what you're selling, but only 39% are buying fine gold women's jewelry, and I think that speaks volumes. You're not communicating the value with these young people, and they really need to hear your message. So I think it's time to create a gold is forever kind of style of platform that will target millennials. And there's a classic case study in marketing and advertising is the De Beers story. They created this diamonds are forever tagline for the De Beers diamond jewelry back in 1948, and it's lasted ever since, and it still works. I think it's time for you to start saying something new and different to young people. Older people understand what you're selling, younger people simply do not, and you need to bridge that gap for them. And advertising can be a good way. So now I'd like to wrap and sort of provide some of the perspectives on the consumer psychology, who these young people are and what really makes them different, besides the fact that they don't really understand gold. Now, we're going into the field with a quantitative study of millennials this month. So again, I'm going to be going back and finishing up this survey and getting into the field. We will be using a VALS segmentation to identify up to 8 different kind of personality profiles within the millennial generation based upon very important psychographic research done by SRI. So that quantitative portion of the study has yet to be done, but I'm going to share some of the basic findings from our focus group qualitative study, and I think it's going to be very eye-opening. First of all, millennials appreciate luxury. They kind of understand what luxury is, but they very strongly reject their parents' status symbol kinds of luxury. It's really not about the Rolex watch. People, what the young people said to us, is my status symbol is the initials after my name. It talks about my personal achievement, who I am, not how much money I have that I can buy a Rolex watch for my wrist. And that's what's important. Another young man who is a legal associate said, well, that the status symbol watch in my law office is the triathlon watch, which costs, $100 or something. The triathlon watch, it says not about how much money I have, but what I do. I'm a triathlete. I need a triathlon watch. That is a whole different world of status symbols than thinking I've got to buy a Rolex. I've got to buy this very expensive luxury good, and it means something. Now, when we look at status, and who measures more powerfully in status? It is young men. I call it the peacock phenomena. They do value status displays because they want to show that they would be good providers and so on and so forth. So there's a certain amount of status symbolism that goes on with young men, millennial men, but it's very different from their fathers or their grandfathers' kinds of status. So they're looking for status symbols that really identify what their personal values, who they are. So it's the Mini Cooper automobile versus a Mercedes, or it's the triathlon watch versus a Rolex, or the J.W. Hugh messenger bag, which is an American-made, and I'm going to talk about that brand in a few minutes, rather than some overpriced Louis Vuitton kind of bag. They're looking for something that really says who they are, not just how much money they've got. And a brand that I think is really admirable and I like is the Suit Supply, and I've blogged about this. It's an international company that is now coming in the United States. They've zeroed in on the millennial young men who are on the road to affluence. They know that these young men don't have a lot of money. They're not partners yet. They're associates. They're working in professional jobs, but they're climbing the ladder. So they don't have thousands of dollars to spend on a suit, but they do need suiting, so they're offering $500 suits. But what makes, and really high quality Italian styling and I guess Italian fabric and so on. So they got good quality suits that they're selling. But I think what really sets Suit Supply apart is that they focus on the service provided to these young men. They assume these young men they're not bringing their father in to help buy them a suit. They need the expertise of the salesperson. So their salespeople are highly trained to size up a man, figure out what size and what kind of style of suit would be most appropriate for his build and his body type. And then they really add a wow factor by offering tailoring done right on the spot. so you don't have to come back in 2 weeks to get your pants hemmed. You get it done right away. So I think Suit Supply is a good example of a brand that is really understanding the dynamics of this younger market. They want what they want, and they want it now, and they don't want to pay a whole lot of money for it. And that's, I think, very powerful. Another interesting brand is Uniqlo, and I understood that this year, given this horrendous winter, that the real it jacket of this season was the Uniqlo ultralight down jacket. It was the jacket that said, I know what I'm about. Guess what? It only cost $70. People don't want to, and in this kind of political climate where everyone's demonizing the inequality and the 1%, you don't want to walk around New York in a fur coat anymore. You want to wear a $70 ultralight down jacket, and that says that you're cool and hip. And it's anti-status, really. It's saying more about who you are than how much you can afford. In addition to, a new take on status symbols, millennials are definitely showing, and they were signaled to us very loud and clear in the focus groups, that they are very willing to trade off money to have more time. And, that means they're going to have less money to spend on luxuries, because if they're not working 80-hour weeks, really putting in the time to grow their incomes, they're not going to have those high levels of incomes like the boomers did. And I think part of that reason why these millennials are saying, I really want work-balance life, I want to have balance, is because they're the children of the baby boomers. And when I was coming up in my career, it was like I was told you can have it all. But I discovered, you can't have it all. You've got to make some trade-offs. So if we look at this generation of millennials, what happens if this whole generation of millennials says, I don't need a $5,000 handbag. I can get along perfectly well with a $100 or a $50 handbag. That works fine for me. Or I don't need a $10,000 watch. All I need is a $100 watch. Or not a watch at all because I got my cell phone. I mean, there are some significant changes coming. As I say, I think this Sheryl Sandberg and her Lean In book, which has created a lot of controversy, I think she's talking to the 20th century. She's not talking to today. The Pew Research Center just put out a study last week that said that nearly 3 in 10 American mothers are now stay-at-home moms. Again, what does that mean? That means they're not making money. That means they're not in affluence. They're making value judgments and saying this is more important. And I think that that's what we see with these millennials, and it's something that we're going to have to confront as we try to market high-end goods. So what I see in the future is conspicuous consumption is going to yield to conscious consumption, and very careful decisions being made about what something is worth. It's the difference between Uniqlo down jacket versus a fur. Who needs the fur? I got Uniqlo, I'll be just as warm. So they're ahead in terms of social, ethical, and environmental responsibilities. They're also leading the way in this this whole rental economy. And I think it's very fascinating. It's like they value access, rent the runway, but they don't need to buy the stuff. They don't need to have it in their closet. They just need to wear it once. I think that's very significant. So I think we're going to have to, come to terms with how this is going to play out in the future of our marketing. Now, I think that we need to start thinking about responsible gold mining, refining, manufacturing, and making that a value proposition of your brand. And there is a responsible jewelry council that is sort of leading the way in responsible gold. But, I don't want you to misunderstand. People aren't going to buy your product because it's responsibly made. Don't kid yourself about that. However, that is a reason why they're going to buy your brand versus somebody else's brand. And that's a powerful competitive proposition. And lastly, this younger generation who have been, marketed to since they were babies, they really know what marketing is all about. They are saying to us that, luxury really is just a label that marketers use, just like designer jewelry. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. And they're very skeptical about this label. And I found the Acura, I don't think this commercial is running anymore, but it's a man who wakes up in his luxury bed and goes into his luxury shower and goes and makes his luxury coffee and puts on his luxury suit. And then he goes out to his Acura and he discovers where real luxury is. As far as I'm concerned, that's showing what the problem is, not what the solution is. And I think Lincoln did a very valiant effort at trying to differentiate the Lincoln Town Car today, or the MKZ today, from Granddaddy's Lincoln Town Car. I think they're doing a very good job trying to differentiate it and talking to this younger generation. But I think the fatal flaw in their advertising is they claim the luxury label. They don't earn the right to label it luxury. And I think that is why the Lincoln is just not working. So they're trying to hit all the buttons, but I think that's the big one. I think if they kept away from the luxury label, they would be better off. And then I've gotten a big kick out of the Kia The Truth ad by Lawrence Fishburne or Samuel Jackson. It depends on who you talk to. But I think they do a very good job of taking luxury and transforming it into something real and meaningful in that ad. So I think that is a very, very interesting ad. And you'll never look at luxury the same way again. Again, everything's luxury, then nothing's luxury. So I think as marketers, we need to strive for new definitions, a new way to describe what we are selling, and avoid at all costs that L word, because today that really doesn't mean very much. You've got to earn it. You can't claim it. So I think we need to push harder at describing what it is we're selling and what it's going to deliver, that luxury feel and experience, what that is ultimately going to deliver to the consumer. So we've got a new study coming out called Luxury's Got a Brand New Style, and I think this is what you're up against. That's the old style luxury, the Hermes bag or this new Louis Vuitton frou-frou thing with feathers and so on. I mean, these cost, can cost six figures. It just makes no sense. People today are looking for meaning, not for just spending a lot of money. And, this bag, J.W. Hume Company, I mean, what's old is new again. And this is a company, I think, it really sticks to its roots. It's a very, very interesting brand. And I think they play up the quality and value of the brand so that does attract the consumer and the millennial customer. And these bags aren't cheap, but believe me, they don't cost thousands and thousands of dollars either. They selling a true value proposition. And one thing that's really, I think, interesting about the J.W. Hume Company, founded in 1905, probably about the same time as the Coach handbag company was founded, is that they offer a lifetime guarantee, forever. Something happens to your bag, they'll fix it for you. Guess what? Coach used to offer that. Coach doesn't offer that anymore. And I think that's sort of why Coach has lost some of its creed in the marketplace. And millennials have, obviously, a very different take on fashion. And Business Week ran an article recently, Loser Couture, from the gym to the runway, that you can wear yoga pants and T-shirts to the office. Who knew? And flip-flops. Who knew? But that's what the young people are doing, and that's a very viable work outfit. So I think we, as when we're talking about marketing jewelry, I think we have to start thinking about, well, what kind of jewelry goes with a yoga pant? And even more importantly for this generation, what kind of jewelry goes with tattoos? I don't know, but I think but you know, because you're the designer, so that's your challenge to find out. But what's old is new again, and here's another example of what's old is new. And this is the company called Swims brand, and this is a company that is creating galoshes to wear over wear over street shoes today. And it's not your grandmother's galoshes, the ones that no one ever wanted to wear. They're cool, they're hip, they're colorful, they fit, and they actually make a fashion statement. And they point to another factor that I feel is very important to understand about the millennials. They're very practical in orientation. If they're going to spend $700 on a pair of designer shoes, they're perfectly willing to spend $100 for a pair of swim galoshes to protect them. And Swims, of course, has now gone upscale with a branding through Armani. So they're now offering Swims galoshes for different Armani shoes. And that costs more than $100, so that's in the $200 range. So as I close, the key branding challenge that you face is how do you make gold relevant to this generation? I think we have a lot of evidence here that you're just not as relevant to this generation as you were to previous generations. And to send the message to this new generation, you can't fall back on all the old stuff you used to tell baby boomers, people my age. You've got to think of new stories to tell. You've got to think of new ways to tell it, whether that's social media, whether that's internet, whether that's on television or me, I don't know, but you've got to tell them a new story and tell them in a new ways, and you've got to delve deeply into the mindset of this consumer. So with that, I'll take questions, and again, remind you, if you want any slides that you want to use and do homework, well, just give me your card and we'll get it to you. So. Yes. Well, I mean, that's part of my brand secret. No, but we use panels, research panels that are recruited. And if you've ever taken a survey, you often at the end of the survey, online survey, at the end of the survey it'll ask you, are you interested in becoming part of a panel? And lots of people say yes. You know, part of the reason why younger people, in fact, are really not hesitant to answer surveys in many cases is because they want you as marketers to know. I mean, they're very willing to share a whole lot of stuff on their social media. And I find the same thing. They're much more willing to share information. I mean, they're sharing it invisibly because we don't identify who the panelists are. But they're very willing to tell you what they think because they think what they think is pretty important. And I happen to think it's pretty important too. So, yes. Oh, they're
or is it all over the map and they're just looking for the best deal?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds. I mean, we can do lots of pricing evaluations, and I think it's a very good study to do. Is look at you, and you can when you start doing survey data or analyzing customer relationship kind of data from customer relationship systems, you can definitely see the breaks in the price point. But, my whole point of view in terms of pricing for my clients, that, because when you're going out there, you really don't know ultimately what the price the market will bear, is to figure a little bit above average, but not way up. I mean, I like the price point that I like in whatever given range we're talking about is what I call the premium space. So it's above mass market price, besides what you'd see at Sears or, Macy's, that kind of thing, but under what the heritage luxury price is. Because I think to get to that point, you've got to earn that right, and it takes time. Most of these heritage luxury brands have been around for 100 years. So it's somewhere in the medium, and Michael Kors is the example that I use all the time of kind of that premium space. Coach, unfortunately, has kind of gone all across the board, but they used to be what I would call in that premium space, sort of, not $3,000, $300, and that's more than a lot of women I know spend on handbags. So, yes.
First, I want to acknowledge your
there are a number of trade associations that, market research type folks that get together.
About as far as this lifestyle, because it's not just jewelry, it's
Oh, AMA like groups? American Marketing Association? Yeah. Well, I guess, I'm pretty much a soul. I go alone. I really find that, I'm interested, what I'm interested in, my research sort of takes me. I didn't know I was going to end up talking to this audience about affluent and luxury when I started my company in 1992. My research sort of took me, hey, this is where the action is. And coming out of the recession, the affluents are the only people with any kind of money at all anyway. So, I'm kind of out there in the vanguard, I guess.
what we find is that we're losing the department stores, the luxury department stores. And that's where I think it all begins. Certainly 150 years ago, it took us 125 years
Yeah.
to carry us. And we're losing them to Wall Street and vertical manufacturing and retailing and branding rather than quality of the product.
Oh, exactly. And
It is the role of the trade association to step up and bring the community together.
yeah.
So obviously, we need the trade association to do that.
Well, yeah. So I don't think it's the National Retail Federation, so I think you're right. Any other questions?